Emma and Luke had been married for almost 2 decades, and for years, their love had been like a steady current, reliable, sometimes gentle, but often unremarkable amid the chaos of daily life. They'd met in college, where every day felt like an adventure, a dance of long hikes, late-night talks, and impulsive plans. But now, the thrill they once shared had faded into a routine of work schedules, homework help, and quiet evenings where they sat side by side on the couch, each lost in a screen. They weren't unhappy, not exactly. But there was a quiet distance that neither spoke of, each afraid to acknowledge that their love had dulled. Their lives revolved around their children, bills, and responsibilities, and they rarely spent time alone. Emma sometimes wondered if she and Luke had grown more like roommates than a couple in love. Then one night, as they sat on the couch, Emma glanced over and noticed Luke's face illuminated by his phone, looking distant. Something stirred inside her, a longing for those moments when his eyes had only been for her. She missed the little things that used to spark joy between them, like his laugh over a silly joke or the way he'd hold her hand as they walked together. She went to bed that night feeling both nostalgic and restless, a part of her wishing for that lost closeness. The next morning, she woke up before him and decided to make coffee, a small gesture, but something she hadn't done in a long time. She left his cup on the counter with a note that simply read, "Just a reminder, I love you." Luke woke up to find the coffee and note waiting for him. Surprised, he smiled, feeling a warmth that had been missing for some time. Emma's simple note lingered with him all day, and he realized just how much he'd missed these small moments between them. That night, Luke cooked dinner, something Emma usually handled on her own. He didn't say much, just served the food and offered her a small smile. She noticed, though, and felt a spark of gratitude and affection. No big gestures, no sweeping declarations, just two people trying to reconnect in small, quiet ways. Over the following days, they each started finding little ways to make the other smile. Emma began leaving notes in Luke's lunch bag, tiny reminders like, "Hope your day's good," or "Can't wait to see you tonight." Luke, in turn, started texting her during his breaks at work, sometimes just to say hi or share a funny story from his day. They hadn't done this in years, but these small acts were like windows into each other's lives, the little pieces they'd forgotten to share. Slowly, the space between them began to shrink. One evening, after a long day, Emma noticed a small bouquet of wildflowers on the kitchen counter. Luke had picked them up on his way home, knowing she loved them because they reminded her of the forest hikes they'd taken in college. She felt a wave of affection she hadn't felt in years, realizing he'd remembered such a small detail. She went over to him and placed a gentle hand on his arm, giving him a smile that said more than words could. "You still remember the hikes," she said softly. Luke looked at her, his eyes warm. "I remember a lot more than you think." That night, Emma lay in bed, feeling an odd sense of peace. She knew they hadn't solved everything overnight, but these little things, coffee, flowers, a shared smile, were enough. The next morning, she wrote about their evening, a short personal note that captured her gratitude. She left it on the counter, as a small reminder of the closeness they were building. When Luke read her note that morning, he felt a surge of emotion and decided to add his own message in response. They started leaving notes for each other every day, creating a sort of silent conversation. Each message was a memory or a simple expression of gratitude. Soon, their counter became an archive of small messages, words that reminded them of the love they were slowly rediscovering. As the days turned to weeks, these small gestures became part of their routine. They weren't about grand declarations or dramatic changes, but about learning to cherish the everyday moments together. Luke began taking evening walks with Emma after dinner, just around the neighborhood. Sometimes they talked, other times, they walked in comfortable silence. They found themselves sharing their hopes and fears with a new openness they hadn't had in years. Emma started sharing her dreams of writing again, and Luke confided his desire to try guitar, a hidden ambition he'd never mentioned before. One Sunday, they decided to hike one of the trails they had explored when they first met. They strolled through the forest, the sunlight filtering down through the leaves, bathing them in warmth. Luke reached for Emma's hand, a simple gesture, but one that made her heart swell. They walked in easy silence, memories flowing back with every step. Afterward, as they sat on a fallen log, they reminisced about those carefree college days. Luke laughed, recounting their first hike together, when they'd gotten lost and had to walk an extra mile. Emma laughed too, feeling a happiness that ran deep. But more than nostalgia, it was the realization that this closeness wasn't just a memory. It was something they could choose to build every day. When they got home, they continued their tradition of leaving notes for each other. Over the months, their children noticed too. Their oldest daughter, Sophie, started asking about the notes, and they shared a few with her. She smiled, clearly touched, and told them she loved seeing them happy together. One night, Sophie surprised them with a letter she had written, thanking them for showing her that love could be quiet, steady, and intentional. She said their relationship had taught her that love didn't always look like movies, but was sometimes made of small, unremarkable things that held everything together. Emma and Luke read her letter with tears in their eyes, realizing that their small actions had created a legacy of love for their family. On their anniversary that year, Luke surprised Emma by framing some of their favorite notes, including the first one she'd written that morning with coffee. They looked at the collection, laughing at some of the simple messages and feeling grateful for the journey they'd shared. It was a love story that had been years in the making, but it was made all the richer by the trials and quiet moments they'd chosen to share. That evening, they sat together in their living room, holding hands and reflecting on the path they'd traveled. Emma felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the love they had rekindled, but for the small, steady acts that had brought them back together. She realized that their love hadn't faded, it had simply transformed. It was still vibrant, still alive, and in every way, just as real as it had been all those years ago. They raised a quiet toast, each silently pledging to keep choosing each other, every day, through the big moments and the small ones alike. In the end, they knew that love was not about the grand gestures but the everyday kindnesses that kept their hearts connected, even when life threatened to pull them apart. In the gentle glow of that evening, they sat hand in hand, grateful for a love that was both old and new, one they had chosen to rediscover in the quiet, precious moments that filled their days.